Opening hook, Putin's fatal miscalculation, Vladimir Putin, in the shadow of a new Russia that he envisioned as a powerful, restored empire, made a fateful decision in February 2022. He believed that Ukraine, a fractured nation, would fall swiftly to his superior military might. He anticipated that the West, distracted by its internal divisions, would be unwilling to stand up to his aggression. But what he didn't count on, what no one could have anticipated, was the unyielding resistance of a nation that refused to give up its sovereignty. For months, the world watched in disbelief as Russia's military sputtered in its attempt to take Kyiv, the heart of Ukraine, while Ukrainian civilians and soldiers alike stood their ground. But Russia's failures went beyond its operational blunders. The invasion exposed cracks in the Kremlin's larger strategy. Putin, unable to adjust quickly, would find himself not only fighting a well-equipped, motivated adversary, but also facing mounting global isolation and economic turmoil. Section 1. Russia's military failures. Putin's expectations were simple: a quick victory that would restore Russia's sphere of influence in Europe. He believed that the sheer weight of Russia's military would quickly crush Ukraine. Yet this was never going to be an easy victory, and Russia's military was woefully unprepared. Poor logistics, low morale, and outdated equipment plagued Russian forces. Tanks stalled on highways, soldiers surrendered in droves, and air superiority, once considered a given, was increasingly contested. More critically, the invasion exposed a deeper issue: Putin's belief in the invincibility of Russia's military might. The Russian army, despite its numbers, proved unable to carry out a modern war of attrition. It was not the overwhelming shock-and-awe assault Putin had envisioned. Instead, it was a drawn-out struggle where the costs in lives and resources became unsustainable. Russian generals were dismissed. Tactical errors piled up, and despite Putin's bluster, the Russian military faltered in the face of staunch Ukrainian resistance. The strategic failures only compounded as Russia shifted to bombing civilian infrastructure, including critical utilities. These tactics were meant to break the will of the Ukrainian people, but rather than causing surrender, they galvanized them. Cities were reduced to rubble, yet the resolve of Ukrainians grew stronger. Russian air superiority, once thought unchallenged, was increasingly neutralized by sophisticated Western air defense systems. Section 2. Ukraine's strategic advances. The true story of this conflict lies not in Russia's failures alone, but in Ukraine's ability to turn the tide. When Russian troops first stormed across the border, many predicted the collapse of Ukraine within weeks. But what unfolded was a military and psychological triumph for Ukraine. While Ukrainian forces initially had to rely on a mix of Soviet-era technology and military hardware, the strategic partnership with the West soon began to pay off. The introduction of advanced weapons systems, including Javelin anti-tank missiles, HIMARS rocket systems, and sophisticated air defense systems, transformed Ukraine's defense capabilities. But it wasn't just about the weapons, it was the strategy behind them. Ukrainian forces, led by commanders familiar with their terrain, quickly adapted to the changing dynamics of the battlefield. In Kharkiv, Kyiv, and the south, Ukrainian forces demonstrated agility and innovative military tactics. The counteroffensives, which seemed impossible at first, began to push Russian forces back. But more importantly, the world saw that Ukrainian resolve was unbreakable. The world watched as Ukrainian forces re-entered towns once thought lost forever, reclaiming not just land, but their dignity. Section 3. Putin's panic and pressure. As the war dragged on, Putin's plans began to unravel. The Kremlin's initial narrative that Ukraine would collapse within days was increasingly exposed as a fantasy. The more Putin pushed, the more the consequences spiraled out of control. His inner circle began to fracture, his generals questioned his orders, and his country felt the pain of international sanctions. Putin's response was to double down. He threatened nuclear escalation, signaling to the West that any intervention could lead to catastrophic consequences. But these threats seemed less like the strategic calculations of a leader in control and more like the desperate pleas of someone who could no longer grasp the reins of power. What had started as an effort to reshape the European order turned into a struggle to maintain domestic control. International sanctions, while harsh, did not shatter Russia's economy in the way many had predicted, but they did weaken it. The ruble plummeted. Inflation spiked. The once vibrant Russian elite faced pressure, and public dissent, though stifled, began to rise. The pressure of war on Russia's infrastructure was undeniable. Putin had also miscalculated the international community's response. Initially hesitant, Western powers solidified their support for Ukraine. The supply of advanced weaponry ramped up, and economic sanctions became more crippling. What Putin thought would be a brief regional conflict was now morphing into a proxy war, one in which Russia was increasingly isolated. Section 4. Global geopolitical consequences. The consequences of this war stretch far beyond the borders of Ukraine. The shifting alliances, economic disruptions, and military realignments will reverberate across decades. Putin's actions set off a cascade of reactions, both from the West and from former Soviet republics. NATO, once considered a relic of the Cold War, has found new purpose. Sweden and Finland, once staunchly neutral, have moved toward NATO membership in response to Russia's aggression. The European Union has reaffirmed its commitment to collective defense, and countries in the global south have recalibrated their own positions on Russian influence. Economic consequences are also far-reaching. The war has decimated Ukrainian infrastructure and put immense pressure on European energy markets. The West's push to reduce dependence on Russian gas and oil has accelerated, pushing Europe toward renewable energy solutions. But it also highlighted the economic power of the US dollar, which remains the world's reserve currency despite attempts by Russia and China to create alternatives. The war, it turns out, is not only a geopolitical conflict, but a battle for economic dominance. Conclusion: the courage of the Ukrainian people. In the end, what stands out most is the resilience of the Ukrainian people. This is not just a story of military tactics or shifting alliances. It is a story of survival. It is about men and women, young and old, standing their ground against the most powerful military on earth. Ukrainian civilians, in their defiance, have become a symbol of resistance, not just for their country, but for the world. From the bloody streets of Mariupol to the defiant barricades in Kyiv, the courage shown by ordinary Ukrainians has become the true weapon of this war. They have endured bombings, displacement, and unimaginable suffering, yet they continue to fight. It's a lesson that will be remembered long after the war ends, that sovereignty, independence, and freedom are worth fighting for no matter the cost. And as this war continues with its terrible human toll and its political ramifications, one thing is certain: Ukraine is not just fighting for survival. It is fighting to define its future and the future of Europe, a future that Putin never anticipated, and one that the world will forever remember. This framework is a strong starting point for a Rachel Maddow-style script, blending investigative journalism, emotional storytelling, and geopolitical analysis. If you're satisfied with this structure, I can continue to expand and deepen each section as per your requirements. Let me know how you'd like to proceed.